Welcome to Soft Talk, the international media. Western media, in particular, does not have much space for countries like Nepal. They consider them pretty small, pretty weak, corruption plagued, instability wrecked, these kinds of while describing countries like Nepal, they just uh, use adjectives like poor, corruption plagued, ill governed, and whenever they have to cover the developments in countries like Nepal, they use planted lenses to project the condition of such countries. Like most of the times, most of the Western media, the Western world borrows the Indian lenses to look into the affairs, the goings on in Nepal. This just comes as a very unwelcome kind of uh, response. This does not go well with Nepal and the Nepalese. They have this, the Western world has this geostrategic lens, this confined lens of narrow national interests through which the Western world mostly sees Nepal. And it suits them very well to use the mostly the Indian lens to look into Nepal. But this myopic vision of the Western world has affected us dearly. There were times when Nepal used to feature in international media, most of the times for wrong reasons. That was during the Maoist insurgency. At that time, the present day leader, the chairman of the CPN Maoist Center, now it's the CPN Maoist Center. It used to be, it used to have other names during uh, the previous times. The chairman of the Maoist Center has become the prime minister of this country. Nepal has gotten its 44th prime minister. President Vidyadevi Bhandari administered the oath of office and secrecy to Prachanda, Pushpakamal Dahal Prachanda, and his uh, small cabinet consisting of 7 members aside from him. This event, this administering of the oath of office, the swearing in of the cabinet has featured in neighborly media as well as the international media. Sections of the Western media have projected him as like someone who has just entered mainstream politics. They just have taken him as some sort of revolutionary leader, uh, as if they were quite uncertain about the course that he will take. But this is quite far from the truth. For sections of the Western world, including some of the European countries, Pushpakamal Dahal alias Prachanda is not a new name. They have known him all along. In many cases, they have they have given their tacit support to the Maoist leader. They have found in Prachanda a person, a leader who can just pursue their interests in Nepal. During the insurgency years, they extended their tacit support to this leader. So these media projecting him as some uncertain character, uh, some mysterious revolutionary, does not sound that much convincing. As for India, also, Prachanda is quite well known. After all, he was operating from safe havens that India provided during those difficult insurgency years. Those times were very hard, very harsh for Nepal and the Nepalese. Those were the times when Nepal's nerve centers used to be attacked. You never knew whether you were safe or not. You never knew what would happen to this country, whether this state itself would collapse or not. The Nepalese are quite wary of the Western world seeing Nepal through borrowed lenses. The Nepali society is quite fed up with this Western outlook in particular that just tends to ignore Nepal's sensitivities, the sensitivities of a country located in a very tight geostrategic and geopolitical space. So it would be quite contextual to view Nepal for a change uh, from the northern neighbor. This is also because, from the borrowed lenses of the northern neighbor, this is also because Beijing seems quite elated at the elevation of this so called left alliance to power, despite the fact that the Nepali Congress was the party that garnered a majority votes in the November 20 federal and provincial elections. Given that the world will not look at us as things stand from the lenses of Nepal, for a change, let's look at Nepal. Let's look at this swearing in of Prachanda from the northern lenses. For the time being, we'll come to the western lens as well as the Indian lens as we just move along with this presentation. So let's read out what major media outlets have just written about the elevation of Prachanda, the former revolutionary. Global Times describes this event as thus: China has congratulated Pushpakamal Dahal, chairman of the Communist Party of Nepal, Mao Center, also known as Prachanda, on his appointment as the new Prime Minister of Nepal. It's a rather long sentence, so let me just break it a bit. China is willing to continue working with the Nepalese government to deepen bilateral ties, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said on Monday. Then comes the People's Daily. The Daily writes Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning Monday congratulated Pushpakamal Dahal, chairman of the Communist Party of Nepal, Mao Center, on being appointed as the new Prime Minister of Nepal. Mao said China looks forward to deepening bilateral cooperation in different fields. Mao made the remarks at a regular press briefing when asked to comment on a related query. She said that China has noted that Nepal's election went smoothly and believes that Nepal will maintain a national socio-economic development under the joint efforts of the government and the people and the constitution people and the consultation and cooperation of all parties and political forces. Then comes, then let's just move a bit forward and read what, let's read, try to read at least the minds of the Western media on this development. The Washington Post writes the former leader of Nepal's Maoist rebels, Pushpakamal Dahal, widely known as Prachanda, was sworn in Monday as Prime Minister, signaling a potential foreign policy shift in the Himalayan nation caught between international powers. As leaders of the Communist Party of Nepal, Mao Center, Prachanda, 68, finished third in the November 20 elections behind the sitting Prime Minister Sher Bahadur Deuba of the Nepali Congress and KP Sharma Oli, a former Prime Minister who leads the unified Marxist-Leninists. While Deuba is widely seen as pro-India and pro-America, Prachanda and Oli, the heads of warring Communist Party factions who have fallen out and rejoined forces several times, are seen as pro-China. Despite the Washington Post's claims, Prachanda and Oli, they both have gone out of their ways to serve Indian interests at the expense of Nepal and the Nepalese. As for KP Oli, he just was crucial in the passage of the Mahakali Treaty that severely impinged on Nepal's national sovereignty, Nepal's water sovereignty, through other deals like deals over the Arun River, uh, deals over the Arun River and other rivers reached with India. India, KP Oli has served India more than he has served Nepal. As for Prachanda, There should be a serious debate on what on whether the Maoist insurgency at the end ended up further destabilizing Nepal, further weakening Nepal in a very uh, turbulent geopolitical scenario, in a very turbulent, very uncertain geostrategic scenario, then strengthening Nepal further. There should be serious intellectual debates on this topic. Then comes the rioters, a former Maoist guerrilla who led a decade-long insurgency against Nepal's Hindu monarchy was on Sunday appointed prime minister for a third time in alliance with the main opposition after last month's election returned a hung parliament. Pushpakamal Dahal, who still goes by his nom de guerre Prachanda, meaning terrible or fierce, will head the new government for the first half of the 5-year term with the support of the opposition Communist Unified Marxist-Leninist Party and some other smaller groups, party officials said. Then comes Delhi, of course. Let's just read out what some of the Indian media outlets have written about this development in the immediate neighborhood. I must admit that Indians are very brainy and it is quite difficult to read their minds, especially vis-a-vis Nepal. But let's try to read a bit on what's going on there in their minds. The Hindu writes, Pushpakamal Dahal Prachanda was sworn in as the Prime Minister of Nepal at a ceremony on December 26, 2022 in Kathmandu. As the event got underway, the image that came out strongly was that both the former Maoist rebel leader Prachanda and the outgoing Prime Minister Sher Bahadur Deuba were dressed in Daura Surwal, the dress of Nepal's traditional power elite. Mr. Prachanda in the past avoided it and preferred a western jacket. Speculation has begun if the choice of Taura Surwal indicates an evolution in Mr. Prachanda's ideological journey. We had not read that much about this uh, change of dress. This is such an astute observation. In fact, they are indeed quite brainy, aren't they? With all those chess players and uh, scientists and whatnot, we should also try to just learn from them and just develop our brains more and more, I think, because we are good neighbors. We have so much to learn from India, the Indian institutions. It's not a perfect democracy. I have seen debates over every issue, very lively debates in the British Parliament. Such is not the case most of the times in the Indian Parliament, but they are the world's largest democracy. They have practiced it for like decades, and they have institutions that can save democracy and human rights from marauding political leaders. So we should learn quite a bit from them and try to be a bit more clever than we are. Let's continue. I am blabbering a bit too much, so let's just return to the topic at hand. Then comes the Indian Express. Let's read out a bit from what they have written about this development in Nepal. The Indian Express writes, Pushpakamal Dahal Prachanda was sworn in as Nepal's new Prime Minister on Monday after he switched sides to join hands with a bitter foe, sorry for this slip of tongue, the former Prime Minister Khadga Prasad Oli. By the way, I'm reading out a report by our veteran journalist Yuvraj Ghimire. This is Prachanda's third stint as the head of government in the 14 years since Nepal's monarchy was abolished. Before joining mainstream politics in 2006, he had led the Maoist revolt in Nepal for over a decade. Until Sunday, Prachanda was sworn in a pre-election alliance with former Prime Minister Sher Bahadur Deuba. The five-party alliance, led by Deuba's Nepali Congress, was the front-runner after the November 20 elections, winning the largest number of seats in a fractured mandate. However, Prachanda walked out of the alliance at the last moment after Deuba turned down uh, his demand for the PM chair. Then comes Vion. Am I pronouncing it right? Vion, guys? Let me read out a report from their outlet. Let me read out a bit from Vion. What does it have to say about the developments in Nepal, ending the dramatic political chaos in Nepal? CPN Maoist Center Chairman Pushpakamal Dahal Prachanda was on Sunday appointed as the Prime Minister for the third time after receiving support from opposition CPN UML and other small parties. It is quite hard to read this long a sentence in one breath because English is my second language, so I'm not that good at it. But let me just try to continue with this WION presentation about the developments in Nepal. It just shows a very sad picture of Prachanda. In a meeting, CPN-UML led by KP Sharma Oli along with Rashtriya Swatantra Party, CPN Mao Center and other small parties decided to form the country's new government under Prachanda's leadership. Then comes the South China Morning Post. It writes, a former Maoist guerrilla who led a decade-long insurgency against Nepal's Hindu monarchy, was on Sunday appointed Prime Minister for a third time, in alliance with the main opposition after last month's election returned a hung parliament. Pushpakamal Dahal, who still goes by his nom de guerre, Prachanda, will head the new government for the first half of the five-year term, with the support of the main opposition Communist Unified Marxist-Leninist Party and some other small groups, party officials said. That is what the South China Morning Post writes. Then comes Le Monde. Am I pronouncing it right? Just let me know. Nepal's president appointed former guerrilla leader Pushpakamal Dahal prime minister for the third time on Sunday. December 25, after his Maoist party cobbled together a coalition following elections last month. Mr. Dahal, better known by his nom de guerre, Prachanda or the Fierce One, hid out for years in the jungle during Nepal's 1996-2006 civil war that killed nearly 17,000 people and led to the end of the monarchy. Sagar Acharya, a spokesperson for President Vidyadevi Bhandari, said that Mr. Dahal, 68, has been appointed as the new Prime Minister and would be sworn in on Monday. Quite a lot about Nepal in the international media, isn't it? Because in their eyes, Nepal is not that significant a country as our neighbors are. Appointment of Prachanda as the Prime Minister, as the 44th Prime Minister of Nepal. This comes at a time when the world is in turmoil. Tensions are ratcheting up between India and China, India and the United States, India and China in our immediate neighborhood are fighting have come to blows over Taiwan and other disputed territories. We are in a very difficult geostrategic and geopolitical space. History has shown us that we lose when uh, the two neighbors come closer. This is quite evident when you look at the 2015 uh, trade agreement, trade and transit agreement between India and China. They had this 40-point deal. Through that deal, they agreed to just promote bilateral trade and the movement of the people through the Lipu Lake Pass. Nepal has been consistently saying that India has occupied, it has been occupying a 400 square kilometer parcel of land in the Kalapani Limpiadhura Lipu Lake region. Nepal has been consistent in its stance that Indian troops took refuge in that 400 square kilometers of land in the Limpiadhura Kalapani Lipu Lake region after suffering a defeat at the hands of the Chinese PLA during the 1962 war between India and China. So Nepal has been saying that this territory belongs to Nepal. But in that twist of 2015, both India and China blatantly ignored Nepal's sovereign claims over that territory, and without informing Nepal, they just struck a deal to just promote bilateral trade and transit through that all-weather crossing, that all-weather border point of geopolitical and geostrategic significance. This was a blatant violation of Nepal's sovereignty, national sovereignty, and territorial integrity. So that it has become quite clear that Nepal stands in a very tight, very sensitive geostrategic and geopolitical space. Moreover, there is this increased tension between Russia and the United States, Russia and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization over Ukraine. There is this fight going on between Russia and Ukraine, and NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, is obviously involved in that conflict. In such scenarios, countries like Nepal, albeit smaller ones, medium sized countries, tend to lose much. In sensitive times like this, it was during those sensitive times of the 1950s that Nepal was coerced in a way into signing the 1950s Peace and Friendship Treaty with India. uh, after Immediately after the British left India. This treaty ended up just weakening Nepal's national sovereignty. Successive deals after the 1950s. I have said this time and time again, as such like the Gandak Treaty, the Kusi Agreement of that decade after the 1950s. Uh, they ended up further weakening Nepal's national sovereignty and water sovereignty. We are coming to know about that at this juncture only because the leaders of that time kept on pressing for these treaties in a very opaque manner. At that time also, there were protests against those treaties and deals, but then the leadership, the so-called democratic leadership, ignored people's concerns and just went ahead with those agreements. It was perhaps meant to protect their petty interests, to remain in power at the expense of Nepal and the Nepalese. Then came the political changes of the 1990s. After that change, Nepal, uh, under the leadership of Prime Minister Girija Prasad Koirala, signed the much controversial Mahakali Treaty. This treaty complicated further Nepal's territorial dispute with India. This treaty ended up gifting the Mahakali River to India at the expense again of Nepal and the Nepalese. Various deals at the time during the passage of this treaty, the former Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli played a significant role in passing that, in just uh, ratifying that treaty, that much controversial treaty through the parliament. The erstwhile Prime Minister, Sher Bahadur Deuba, was quite instrumental in just getting the parliament's approval for this treaty. At the time, there were reports of horse trading in the parliament. Various unethical means were adopted just to ensure the passage of the treaty. Of course, one cannot forget the very controversial role uh, that the Prime Minister of that time, Girija Prasad Koirala, played. He just, during his visit to India, secretly signed on that treaty, uh, the Mahakali Treaty. He gave his go ahead for the treaty. At that time, at that time in India, P.V. Narsingh Rao was the prime minister, and just in a very secret and in a very opaque manner, Girija Prasad Koirala committed to that treaty at the expense of Nepal and the Nepalese, at the expense of Nepal's water sovereignty and territorial integrity also. This treaty further ended up compounding this dispute over the Kalapani Lipulek Limpiadhura region of Nepal. So we stand in a very tight geopolitical, geostrategic situation. We tend to lose when international tensions rise, when we have to pick sides, one or the other military alliance, defense military alliance. Uh, there are indications that we are veering off from our policy of non alignment. So this comes at a cost. Instead of not choosing sides, we tend at this moment to be quite close to one particular defense military alliance. The leaders ought to treat with caution because uh, Nepal's national interests, I think, are best defended when it just takes care, when it raises voices, uh, stands uh, firmly behind its national interest instead of joining one or the other political defense military alliance. India has its interests in Nepal. It has its deep entrenched interests in Nepal. The United States, of course, has interests in Nepal. A rising China is causing it immense worry, I guess. This assertive Russia is also adding to its headache. So, Nepal, being a close neighbor of China, holds a strategic significance for the United States, the world's sole superpower. China, being a rival at this juncture, a foe of India, Nepal holds significance for India as well. There are other areas of interest for India in Nepal. These interests, I have said earlier also, come at the expense of Nepal and the Nepalese. So we are in a very tight geostrategic space. We are walking this tightrope. The government of the day ought to tread with caution instead of choosing sides in international conflicts. This government should mind its own business. It should take care of Nepal's national interest. It should uh, have just utmost regard for the interest of successive generations of Nepalese. That is what it should do. It should just have just wide-ranging consultations with different political parties. It should just reach out to experts to devise a course of action that best protects the interest of Nepal and the Nepalese in a difficult time like this. With this, I wrap up this edition of Soft Talk. As you already know, and I have told you quite a number of times, let me repeat again. Let me repeat. Uh, we are an independent media outlet. We are trying to promote through our channel citizen journalism, a strain of journalism that is free from vested interests. We ask you to subscribe to this channel, comment on our presentation, and also press that like button. We ask you to be a bit more generous and promote our channel. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Have a good day.